We're at April 22nd, 2022 today, and we're going to be starting up the irrigation. First thing you want to do is make sure there's no black widows or snakes right here where you're going to be sticking your face. And I done see one back here in the back corner. Oh, there's one right there too. That ain't good. My irrigation is fed off a well, so it may be a little bit different for you if you're fed off city water. But if you just kind of think about the general idea, I've got water coming through here to my house through that black pipe. So I've got to get water coming right around here, coming through my backflow preventer and down to my irrigation. So you got a valve on one side of your backflow preventer and you got another valve on the other side. So simply turn the valve on. I always want to turn it on slow, give it time to fill up so you don't damage your fittings from a water hammer. After you hear it stop filling up, then just go ahead and open your valve on up. Down here in my basement is where I decided to mount my irrigation control boxes, and I've got 2 of them here. And the reason I have 2 is simply because I ran out of space in my yard irrigation box, which is on bottom. It's expandable up to 22 zones, and I have 21 zones of yard irrigation. So I've got 1 spare, and then I had 3 drip lines of landscape irrigation, and I have a few extra for the future use. So I simply couldn't fit them all in one. That's the only reason I have 2 boxes. I do have a Wi-Fi control module for both. Highly recommend it when you're trying to test zones, adjust heads, winterize your irrigation, all that. It's very cumbersome to come down here and manually run the zones. And it's also kind of a headache to program the different start times and days from here as well. So I would definitely invest in a Wi-Fi control module for these if you have a Rainbird controller. There's the tool we're going to be using today. Comes with the Rainbird 5000 series heads. I've got the 5004s. You could probably just use a flathead screwdriver, but this is going to adjust your 0 to 360 degrees. And it's also going to adjust how far the head will throw. So if you have the Wi-Fi module for your controllers, this is what the Rainbird app looks like. And I've got a controller for yard irrigation and controller for landscape irrigation. So for the yard irrigation, we're just going to go into this raindrop here, and that's going to be your manual water zones. And the farthest one I've got away from my house is zone number 6. You can really start with whichever one you want, but I'm just going to start with number 6 here. And we're just going to hit the start button and watch it run. So one of the reasons that we're going to run each zone individually is because I want to make sure that none of the zones were damaged from cars running off the road or from the mower clipping the top or just anything like that if you were digging trenches. That zone looks pretty good, so my goal is to get the road side to shoot right to the edge of the white line, and then on this side you can just turn it around and see where it's going to stop. You want it to shoot right to the edge of the flower beds. Just get it the best you can on a curved area. It's going to be hard to do with these type sprinkler heads. And then that second one down there, you want it to come all the way to the head of this one, and this one right here, you want it to go all the way to the head of that one. This one right here got a little bit of dirt on top of it. We're gonna have to raise it up some. You can see this one put some dirt on top of it as well, and so it's going to have to be raised up some, but it's also going to need to be moved over about 4 or 5 feet to the edge of the landscape bed so we don't waste all the water here in this landscaping bed. I also want to make sure the coverage is good, so I'll watch it actually go through a full cycle, and we'll adjust the coverage as it goes to the edges of the bed. That's the whole point of this startup, is to make sure everything's functioning as it should and you don't have any potential leaks or damages to any of your equipment. These up here at the road are the ones I'm most concerned by. And I've got a lot of them with damage on top, but they seem to run just fine. You can see that one's obviously been hit by something. But I just want to make sure where cars run off the road over the winter time, they don't damage any. You may see me adjust some of these heads left to right to get them out of the road without actually turning the water off. You're really not supposed to do that. You can damage the gears inside of it, and I've actually stripped some of the gears out doing it, but I still do it. So just keep that in mind when you're doing it. There is a risk involved with adjusting the head-to-head coverage whenever you're got the water running on it. One thing I've noticed over the years when you're starting your system up, when you go to adjust your head-to-head coverage, or you're adjusting how far it shoots right or left to keep it out of the landscape bed or the sidewalk or road, you might want to let it build up pressure first and get it full of water and get all the air out of the system, because that spray pattern will change a little bit whenever it gets filled up with water. So about 4 feet. So what I'm likely going to do is dig that one up and move it over here to the edge of the landscape bed. 2 reasons why I want to do that, because every time I aerate or plug, I have to mark this head. Another reason is you'll see that's as far as it'll go to the right, that's as far as it goes to the left. So this whole area is not seeing any coverage from the irrigation head, from this irrigation head. Whenever I installed this system, I did quite a few things wrong in terms of the layout that I have been correcting over the years. This irrigation head is a prime example of what I was talking about. It used to be about 2 feet into the edge of the turf, and so I moved it back here. That way this part in between the landscape bed and the where the head used to be actually gets irrigation water. If you make it go in a 360, what I found out is all this landscaping in the bed that doesn't like an inch of water a week tends to get overwatered. Now I've killed at least 1 tree doing that, and quite a few other plants. So you notice on that zone it only had 2 heads on it, and that is because you used to have irrigation heads that went up through here, and this was grass all the way over to the wood line. So since we put this planter bed in, I've simply just capped those off underground. What I intend on doing is digging this one up here and attaching a PVC pipe to it and running it up to the road, because I need 1 more zone on the far right hand side. If you're not getting wet while you're working on your irrigation, you're not doing something right. So we got the yard irrigation started up. We didn't do anything with the backyard because it's going to be under a renovation this spring. But the front yard is done. Everything's looking good. I've got 2 reasons why I like to get this irrigation done ahead of time. Charlotte, North Carolina area, we do not need irrigation much this time of year. April, we're getting rain showers at least once a week. We don't hit that high of temperatures throughout the day. We get in the low 80s. Really, I won't be running my yard irrigation until probably end of June, I'm going to guess. That's probably about what it was last year. It just really depends on the rain the month of June. But for me, I like to start it up, and I like to make sure I don't have any major issues where I'm replacing heads, digging up heads, fixing wire, just whatever the circumstance may be. The second reason I like to start it up is because my landscape irrigation. I've got hanging baskets, I've got pots, and flowers that we plant in the ground, and all those things tend to dry out, and I hate going around with a watering can watering those flowers. This is one of our landscaping beds, and I've got 1 zone in here, and eventually, since it's such a small bed, I'd like to run a pipe across the driveway, up the driveway, and get into those landscape beds up by the road off this same zone. This 1/2-inch drip tubing runs throughout the landscape bed. This is just solid drip tubing. And then at every one of my bushes, I punched in a drip emitter to water the bushes. Now I will say that I never run this to water the bushes. Really, this is the reason that I like to put in drip irrigation, because you can tap off of it anywhere you want, come up and put a spray head on it, or you can put in emitter line that goes around like this dahlia here. And then on each one of these drip lines, I've got a little ball valve that goes into this 1/8-inch drip line, and you can turn it off whenever you don't want to use it, or you can turn it on when you want it. All right, here's my valve box. Since we've got the Wi-Fi controller, we don't need to open the valve box up, but if you didn't have a Wi-Fi controller, you'd either do it manually with the valve here, or you'd have to go to the controller and do it that way. When I start this zone, I've got a discharge right here somewhere that's going to shoot water out. Once we get it flushed out, then I'll just simply crimp the end of the line and put a zip tie around it. They make all kind of end caps that you can put on these. Some you put on and screw on, other ones that you just use sort of like this zip tie that's a figure 8 that crimps the end of it. Really doesn't take much. This is a low pressure system. This is going to be my zone number 2, and I'll just give you an idea of how far you can run this drip tubing. I believe they say 500 feet on a solid line before you start losing your pressure, and you can put in a ton of heads. So I got it going up to this basket here. Goes all the way down to the end of the house. And then I've got it coming up the gutter. It's actually inside the gutter. And that's going to go to each one of my hanging baskets. Then I've got a splitter right here. Splits off and it goes under the concrete. It comes under the concrete. Goes all the way down to that Chinese snowball bush. Wraps around the back of the house and comes into this bed as well. And I've got drip emitters in all my pots. And then it tees off again somewhere right in here. And it goes all the way down through here around the blueberry bushes. So this is my favorite part of the whole system, is watering these hanging baskets. And I'll say, since I put this in last year, the hanging baskets have never done as good as they did last year. I'll show you real quick how this drip system works on my potted plants on the porch. I was really hesitant to do it at first because you're not supposed to run this 1/8 inch drip tubing much more than about 10 or 15 feet, but this is run probably close to 100 feet, and I've got the same amount of volume coming out of this basket as I do that other basket 75 feet away. So let me show you how I ran it. Tapped off my 1/2 inch main line, and I used white because it matched everything. Comes down and makes an immediate turn, comes up in the gutter, comes out the top of the downspout, immediately it goes behind the aluminum flashing that holds up my soffit. Comes down, and I just came out the crack that was closest to the basket, so it went up inside the crack. Got one staple in my beam, and then I turned it into black tubing. Came down here because this was black, and then it comes down here to where my drip tubing starts. And I've got a T up inside of there, so then the other side of the T just keeps on going. And I've got 4 baskets that it runs, and it runs them all just perfect. About 5 minutes twice a day. That's all these need. Got one more zone to start up. This is the 3rd zone I have on my drip irrigation, and it goes down to the very end of the Japanese spurge up under this tall oak tree, and then it comes around, and this bed is probably 150, maybe 200 feet long. Something is not right over here. This is just your standard coupler from Hunter. They call it a 17 millimeter. Well, that just about does it for the irrigation startup. Got all the drip irrigation started up, which is what I was mainly concerned with. Yard irrigation is looking pretty good. Don't really see any damages there. Just need to move a few heads is all. Yard's looking pretty good for the 3rd week of April. I'm thoroughly impressed with how it greened up compared to the Bermuda yards around here. Appreciate y'all watching. If you got any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer them.